All right, let's get to the first Wes Anderson movie that I will be discussing, which is Isle of Dogs from 2018. It stars Bryan Cranston, Koyu Rankin, Edward Norton, Bob Balaban, Bill Murray, Jeff Goldblum, Greta Gerwig, Scarlett Johansson, Frances McDormand. And the synopsis is set in Japan. Isle of Dogs follows a boy's odyssey in search of his lost dog. Getting into Wes Anderson as a filmmaker as a whole, Fantastic Mr. Fox is one of my all-time favorite films, was a family favorite growing up as well. All the way up through Grand Budapest, Isle of Dogs, I followed his work pretty religiously, and there were very few low points. But for his directorial style, he is probably one of the only filmmakers working today where I could look at a single shot from any film, from any moment, and say, that is a Wes Anderson movie. And within that, there's a lot of symmetry. Everything is very balanced. The color palettes, there's a lot of pastel colors, a lot of bright colors. It's very, very vivid. The quirkiness of the characters, there's a lot of monotone dialogue deliveries, deadpan humor. The sets are incredibly detailed, and I feel like they have a kind of a miniature look to them intentionally. Most of his style also has a retro theme. Even the soundtracks have Beatles, Beach Boys, the Kinks. There's a lot of dysfunctional families or family-esque dynamics and groups. I guess you could relate him to Spielberg in that way, but they're much more exaggerated. Loss and grief and loneliness of characters, and oftentimes who aren't even sure themselves of their own identity and their purpose. As for Isle of Dogs, it would easily be top 5 Wes Anderson films, and aside from Fantastic Mr. Fox, there are a few other stop-motion films that look as beautiful as this one does. It is rated PG-13, which is not common for a stop-motion film. I'm a huge dog lover. I have 3 dogs of my own, and this obviously shows Wes Anderson's fondness for animals and for dogs. The setup of the film, it doesn't go into it really in the synopsis. It is where all dogs in Japan have been cast out to this trash island because of them having spread disease. Some of the ideas discussed, there's the dehumanization of others, and that can be related to minority groups and the prejudice and the quote-unquote fear that some people have. Wes Anderson's humor is one of the best things about him to me, and I find this to be consistently laugh-out-loud funny, and all the voice performances across the board are great. Oh, and that's one more thing about his style. His ensemble casts are some of the most impressive in Hollywood. I almost relate them to an Avengers movie because of how many people are in them. There are a million sequences, even just starting with the opening credits, when the Japanese boy crashes his plane and meets the gang of dogs. The robot dog attacks, and then meeting Scarlett Johansson's character, the sushi poison assassination, Chief kind of striking up a guardian-child relationship with the boy, and the boy not always listening to him, and that back and forth. There are also a lot of great callbacks to classic Japanese cinema with locations and the kinds of visual styles. The score by Alexander Desplat, who works a lot with Wes Anderson. One of the only missteps that it doesn't bring my star rating down, but it's just odd, is Greta Gerwig's character, who is this kid activist trying to save the dogs. She's doing research on the Japanese boy, and then suddenly, right before a scene ends, she goes, "I think I have a crush on you." It's not really funny. It doesn't add anything to the character later. I was honestly kind of rolling my eyes when that happened. heavy 5 out of 5. Let's get to The French Dispatch from 2021. Stars Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, Lea Seydoux, Frances McDormand, Timothy Chalamet, Lena Kaduri, Jeffrey Wright, and the synopsis is: a collection of stories published in the French Dispatch magazine comes to life in a fictional 20th century French city. I was pretty late to watching this one. I don't think I saw it till maybe 2023, and I've seen it a few times. I know a lot of people like this one. Some people say it's one of his best, it's one of their favorites, and hate to be that guy, but it would be bottom 3 for me as of now. Mainly because, yes, it's beautiful in its construction. It has every single kind of visual style and narrative trick that you could inject, and done fairly confidently. But it's hard for me to stay concentrated on a single scene all the way through without losing focus. I think that's a combination of factors, but this feels very much like style over substance. I don't feel any connection to the characters. No one honestly feels even that real. They all feel like caricatures, which kind of is an ongoing problem I've found in his recent films. I could not tell you what happens or why. I'm also just not a big fan of anthology films, but that's not a big issue in this case. With the style itself, one of the biggest problems that I know some people like, and I don't have an issue with the style choice inherently, but the constant flipping back from color to black and white, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I get that he's doing some flashbacks, some flash forwards, and then present day, and, he's trying to keep things straight. But with how he does it, it's more confusing and more frustrating. It'll flip back and forth between that multiple times within a 30-second period to where I'm just like, all right, I'm kind of over this. I just want to have more time because the editing is so quick. Scenes are so short. The narration is constant. The Benicio del Toro storyline was probably my favorite, and his relationship with Lea Seydoux, who's a prison guard, and then the humor between him and Adrian Brody. It's nice to see Timothy Chalamet in this, but I wish he had more time on screen and a little bit more to do. I respect that it's very much a love letter to journalism. 3.5 out of 5. All right, let's get to Asteroid City from 2023. Stars Jason Schwartzman, Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton. And the synopsis is: world-changing events disrupt the annual Asteroid Day celebration in an American desert town. This is one that has grown on me over the years significantly. One thing that stands out that's great is the visuals. It's one of his all-time best looking, in my opinion. The color palette, the look of that town is gorgeous. Somehow it feels both cartoony, but also real and lived in. The setup is quite simple. This town is dealing with this existential crisis. Feels very reminiscent of the nuclear threat when that first arose in the Cold War. And one of the few things that really sticks with me is the connection between people when dealing with trauma and the mystery of the unknown as to what's to come. Because there are all these various relationships that arise, people who didn't know each other before. Then there's also the meta aspect of this play being done within the film itself. The writing and overall just the storytelling feels the most reminiscent of his earlier work. It has the charm, it has a lot more humor. Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston, Margot Robbie appears randomly at the end, which I'm fine with. Love her. Steve Carell was a nice addition. the look of the alien, very stop motion-esque, and calls back to sci-fi films of that era. And one little tangent here. So the complaint of he does the same thing every time. Every time you see a new trailer for a Wes Anderson film, it's like, okay, that looks just like the last one, essentially, with a few changes. He is, I think, in some ways stuck in his own style. You look at someone like Christopher Nolan. I go in watching Oppenheimer or The Odyssey, having no idea how he's going to handle that story, and that makes it inherently exciting. But anyways, back to Asteroid City, a couple last things. The look of the diner, those mysterious car chases that happen on the main road that everyone looks at. Light 4.5 out of 5. Let's get to The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Three More, which is a collection of short films that he released on Netflix, at first individually, but then they did this compilation piece. It came out in 2024, is based off the work of Roald Dahl, who he also adapted Fantastic Mr. Fox. Stars Richard Ayoade, Mita Chowdhury, Benedict Cumberbatch, Ray Fiennes, Rupert Friend, Ben Kingsley, Deb Patel. And the synopsis for The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar specifically is chronicles a variety of stories, but the main one follows Henry Sugar, who is able to see through objects and predict the future with the help of a book he stole. So I watched these earlier this year for the first time, and all four of them really, they're, I think, truly just for Wes Anderson fans. I think if the average Netflix member put this on, they would turn it off after 30 seconds or a minute and say, what the hell was that? Because they pretty much are all a character on screen narrating to what's happened, saying something like, no, I don't want to do that, and then looking at the screen and saying, I said, which is quite off-putting at first, and at least I have to be in a very particular mood to watch them and enjoy them. I saw a funny review on Letterboxd of Henry Sugar, and it said, my ADHD friend telling me about their weekend. And that's pretty accurate. This one is the longest of the four by quite a large margin. Everything with the stories of Ben Kingsley being this guy who can see even though his eyes are covered up is very entertaining. My favorite being when they put this huge white, almost beehive looking thing on his head and they ask him to move and he's able to walk downstairs, get on a bike. The India setting looks great, or it's primarily in India, I think. Next one is The Swan, which the synopsis is a small, brilliant boy is tormented by two large, idiotic bullies. I thought this one had the most emotional resonance and definitely delves into Wes Anderson's portrayal of bullies, especially for kids. It seems pretty personal that he probably went through things like this. I know I was bullied when I was a kid, so I usually connect with it. Rupert Friend, who's now been in a lot of Anderson films, is fantastic in this. Probably my favorite performance of all four of these. His narration is not only compelling, but when he's walking backwards through this maze and these different hallways, and then doing all these different voices, laying on the train tracks and talking. Anderson seems to have also developed this love for the binoculars POV, maybe at times a little too much, but I still like the visual of that and feels quite storybook-esque. Then there's the rat catcher, and the synopsis is, in an English village, a reporter and a mechanic listen to a rat catcher explain his clever plan to outwit his prey. This was by far the weirdest of the four. Very creepy. The stop motion rats look great. Ray Fiennes, who You know, he's one of those legendary British actors. He can play anything, and his weird stories and these townspeople just having to listen to him talk about how he wants to take down rats, and it's just so odd. Lastly is Poison, and the synopsis is: when a poisonous snake slithers onto an Englishman's stomach in India, his associate and a doctor race to save him. This one had me laughing out loud a lot, mainly because of Benedict Cumberbatch doing all of this dry humor and monologuing while whispering, because he has this snake on top of his chest as he's laying down in this bungalow or something, and Dev Patel is trying to listen to him and to help him, but it's this very interesting dynamic between the two, and you don't know if this snake is legit. Oh, and I didn't mention Ralph Fiennes also plays Roald Dahl in these bookend narration sequences. That worked for me. There wasn't too much of it. 4 out of 5 for that whole collection. All right, let's get to the most recent Wes Anderson film to date, which is The Phoenician Scheme. Came out in 2025, stars Benicio del Toro, Mia Therapulton, Michael Cera, Steve Park, Willem Dafoe, Tom Hanks, Bryan Cranston, and the synopsis is: wealthy businessman Zaza Korda appoints his only daughter, a nun, as sole heir to his estate. As Korda embarks on a new enterprise, they soon become the target of scheming tycoons, foreign terrorists, and determined assassins. I just watched this one a few days ago, and I sort of had a odd experience in terms of my feelings about it changing, because when I watched it the first time, I was like, not a big fan of it. Probably liked it less than The French Dispatch, and I just moved on. And then the rest of the day, that night, I could not stop thinking about it. I'm not even sure at this point why I felt that way. It was just stuck in my brain. I was thinking about the visual style, the characters, the weirdness of it. And I did something that I almost never do. I can't think of the last time that I did this. And I was like, I gotta rewatch it. So I rewatched it last night again and really liked it. I can see why some people are not liking it. Even on Letterboxd, it's a little lesser than star rating wise than most of his works. The story is, and it's definitely one of his most tonally serious films. There's faith and wealth because you have Benicio del Toro, who is a very morally ambiguous, rich character, and he's trying to mend this relationship with his daughter, who is a devout nun. And as nuns are, they have little to nothing in terms of belongings. And I know that some have said it's a commentary on the Middle East and the conflicts there, as well as colonialism, imperial colonialism. But at the same time, you have the daughter who, once she leaves the convent and she's not around entirely pure religious people, she becomes somewhat corrupt, starts smoking and drinking and breaking her vows. And another thing that just came into my head, and as I talk about it, I like it more and more, the idea of the afterlife. When there are jokes, it's either a quick moment of absurdity or it's so understated that it doesn't even come across or register as humor. Benicio del Toro does another great job. I thought that the actress who played the daughter, she's fairly new, really good. And it's the thing that everyone is saying, Michael Cera kills it. I know some people have kind of ragged on him over the years, never got why. I've always liked him ever since I saw Superbad. Scarlett Johansson is only in it for a little bit. Wish she had been in it more. Willem Dafoe, always a nice anchor in a Wes Anderson film. The ending, and then I'll jump around to some other scenes I liked specifically, but another criticism from some is that it doesn't have much of an ending. It kind of just ends very quietly, without a lot resolved, and kind of anticlimactic. I didn't mind that because I feel like a lot of Wes Anderson films end like that. I just thought, okay, it's over. Cool. I wasn't thinking that's it. That's all we get. The opening with the plane blowing out on one side, the basketball game, the recurring line of help yourself to a hand grenade. Pretty much the only thing that didn't work comedically and tonally, writing wise, was I felt like it was him trying to recreate the fantastic Mr. Fox scene of George Clooney and Bill Murray growling at each other, which is a great scene. But in this, it's a few human characters just yelling over each other for 10 seconds, and he repeats it 2 or 3 times. That just did not hit, I think, the way he wanted it to. 4 out of 5.